Well, thank you everybody for joining us on another meeting of Global Technopolitics Forum's research team on July 18. So I'd like to start the session by welcoming Puran. Puran, would you like, he's a new associate. Puran, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thank you, Pari. Thank you indeed. And it is a pleasure to meet with everyone on this call. As Pari said, my name is Puran Pandey. I come from New Delhi, India. And I come from a variety of background, including in the Europe, in Africa. And now currently I am located in Delhi because of the pandemic. So I have got my background in the private sector, the UN, international global think tanks. And the one think tank that I set up in Germany was way back in 2016. And I stayed in Germany till last few months back. So I'm back here and I have now been trying to devote some bit of my time on writing part, which is policy writing work. And currently I'm attempting to sort of put my efforts together to undertake a book project, which is basically on universal basic income and social security in digital age. And how will that really have a lot of impact and effect on everybody, including private sector, government, and the people at large. So this is where I am, and I would like to thank you, Pari, for giving me this opportunity to be able to work with all of you and enlighten myself a little bit more.
Thank you, and we are all delighted to have you. The project is very interesting. I had a question when I was reading your proposal today. I am not sure, is your focus would be the role private sector will play in this, or is it more about whether the universal income is a way to go? I think you're convinced this is the way to go, but where would be the impact? What is the key question of the book, basically?
There are three layers to it, Pari. The first layer is that Industrial Revolution 4 is going to really upset both the markets, commerce, and the people, because that might lead, and people are convinced that that might lead to a lot of disruption in the labor market, which might lead to unemployment, which will really have a lot of impact and effect on the private sector as well. So this is the one layer of the whole thing. And the second layer is that while that happens, people will need to be supported by governments in particular. But governments, as we all know, around the world, are broke. They do not really have enough money. So they need to really talk to private sector and try and come out with collaborative and more innovative models. So that is the second layer to it. The third layer is that every society and economy, wherever it is, be it in global south or global north, they will really begin to innovate and bring more technology and make things better. And therefore, I'm trying to really figure out that while these things will happen, how will the governments and private sector would like to really work together, maybe potentially to work on a new social security compact for the people. We have enough of it in the Europe. When you sit at home for a certain number of months, you are paid by the government, which is basically unemployment allowance. What the pandemic has shown to all of us is that when something of this kind, and now we are talking about the climate change, where it is not only about drought and rain and typhoon and things of that kind, I'm really learning that there's a science which is now beginning to unravel a new layer of truth that the whole earth is getting, disimbalanced. So while we can handle pandemic like, COVID-19 and so on and so on forth, but if God forbid there is something going wrong the way we have it in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and so on and so on forth. Fairly large part of it is happening in Asia as well, Africa, Asia, Europe. So nobody is really going to be unaffected by it. If there were something of that kind to happen, we really need technology to come to our rescue. And therefore, I'm trying to figure out that in times to come, as we move into the future, social welfare, which the governments traditionally have been able to get themselves involved, they will not really be able to carry out that kind of responsibility. So we will really need to look at how can technology study science better and give us a better resilience in terms of drought and typhoon and so on and so on forth. And therefore, we need to really bring the conversation behind science and climate and pandemic, and not only with the government. So it is not only the citizen and the government, but it is going to be the government, citizen, and the private sector. So it is that kind of working idea which I have been trying to explore. And as I sort of proceed into, looking much deeper, I will really also frame questions, try to frame, the method, research method, and how will that really pan out? So it would be a policy blueprint, which is really going to align not only the governments and citizens, but also the private sector. And I will also like to see to it as to how can multilateral institutions, including the UN and everybody else, is going to complement and supplement to see to it as to what kind of welfare model might be developed, which is really going to help people whenever there is, a force majeure of this kind. So that's a primary, thesis, Farid, that I'm trying to look at. It might change a bit, but broadly it is going to look like, what is the future of human welfare and how can universal basic income act as a tool or as an instrument which governments and private sector together will really need to take up and support the people as and when they will pass through and will need to navigate through such scenarios. So that's the broad idea that I have.
Yeah, yeah, basically income system or universal income system for new geopolitical reality of our world, which has changed a lot, and values that now we hold that maybe we didn't have quite in past. Greg, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's a really very interesting proposal. I read it quickly, and I'll give you more comments if you'd like to put on. I had really two major comments. One was the one Patty just made, and that is I read it quickly, and it wasn't entirely clear to me exactly what the central question was. That is, what do you want to understand better after having done the book than you do now? And I think you've just spoken to that issue. The second comment I had was, it seemed to me that what you're exploring, UBI is not especially a useful label. As you know, it's become something of a red herring. Most economists think it's either very inefficient or impossible in current circumstances. And you, it seems to me, are casting your net much more widely by trying to think about new forms of public-private partnership in this welfare space. And so I don't know whether you want to, I guess I'd be inclined not to use UBI because it has so much baggage with it, some good, but lots bad too. So I wondered whether that was a useful thing to hang your work on. Just a question.
This is very, very useful, Greg, what you said. And you might really remember, and he is now in the US. He was my senior in the university where we went together in New Delhi. His name is Abhijit Banerjee, who is a Nobel laureate for 2020.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Abhijit and I mean, he was senior to me by 3 years, but we crossed our pathways in the university where we went to in Delhi. So his Nobel Prize came after my full paper appeared in the Global Encyclopedia, which has already been brought out by Springer Nature.
Yes.
So I started sort of, and you were so right, and I talked to Abhijit as well, and his wife Dufflo as well. And they also told me the same thing, Greg, that you are highlighting. And I really agree with you. And I have only given the working theme as of now. And I will really be going much deeper. And I'm planning to bring in two innovations to UBI so that, we can sort of, not really carry the baggage, as you rightly said. Two things are that UBI so far has been seen as welfare allowance, which has to be given to people regardless of, what they do. And if that was the kind of a thesis that we were to take, which means that the governments have always been, unwilling to go that long way. So two things I'm planning to sort of consider. One, that I'm really trying to bring in an active part to it, which means that, I should not really sit at home simply because there is an UBI as an instrument in the hands of the governments and they will give me some money so that I can continue sitting at home and keep on, running my life. So I'm trying to say that it will have some greater significance only when, we get into pandemic, we get into, certain degree of force majeure where for no fault of mine, I might lose my job. I might have large scale employment disruption. So governments really will need to come forward and take care of my welfare so that I don't really go foodless, homeless, or whatever it is. So I'm really trying to bring in an element of active UBI, which has been missing from the conversation so far. The second thing that has been missing from the conversation, when we really talk about UBI, what Pari referred to is a private sector, role in it. Because when something like in the pandemic, private sector also got heavily affected, and every government around the world went ahead and tried to either give the bailout or gave them certain, concessions so that, they could survive and then, come back fit a little later. So I'm really trying to, therefore, bring in the private sector, and therefore, this whole welfare is no longer going to be between the government and the citizens, but it will run full hog, which will mean government, private sector, especially those which are into big tech, Google, Facebook, and others, they will really play a much greater role than business, per se. So I'm really bringing this thing in. And the third thing which Pari said, what could be the geopolitical impact? And we are really beginning to see it. I mean, look at Asia, look at Europe, look at Africa. People are out practically on the road. What is happening in South Africa now? I mean, it is not about racial inequality in South Africa. It is all about economic unfairness. And people are out looting and doing all kinds of. So I am really trying to bring these three elements. And what I have really tried to offer by way of 3-4 pages that I have, quickly tried to put in terms of my thought, will only keep on developing. But three things I'm trying to bring in. It is all about active, not passive UBI. It is all about bringing the private sector into the conversation. And the third one is how will it really have some kind of an implication on geopolitics? Because we are all interconnected and geopolitics will really get disrupted due to pandemic or maybe tomorrow if we have climate change hitting each of us pretty hard below our belt. So this is, the new elements which I'm trying to bring in, but I completely agree with you, Greg, that how do we really make it a little more innovative, a little more, deepened, and bring in new elements which could really expand the scope and thinking both practice, policy, and praxis when we talk about UBI as an instrument or as a tool currently in the hands of the governments.
That's really very helpful. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I have a suggestion, Puran. I think instead of using the term UBI, maybe you should use AUBI, active universal basic income. So right away, the reader would realize that they're dealing with something new, while it's what it was, but you're adding a layer. Think about it, maybe just a term, add a or I or something to indicate that this is the same thing, but in a new light.
I completely agree with you, Pari. And just to sort of also bring you to another thing which is happening, this whole idea which I published in the first global encyclopedia on UN Sustainable Development Goals, which came out of Switzerland, published by Springer Nature. It is being published by one of the think tanks in Africa, and I will be sending you, something they have sent back to me. So I'll send it to you, which really talks about universal basic income policies and future of human welfare. And there I'm looking at how will that really have implications on intersectional poverty and income inequality. Mm-hmm. So, but I completely agree with you and Greg as well, that how do we really make it more innovative in terms of, what we call it as, how do we really deal with it? So that, we are ahead of the curve from what people might have done already in the past. So I completely agree. Yeah,
that's very interesting. Paul, any comments?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about as far as the positioning goes, which seems to be the issue, the issue that's under discussion. Puran, if I understood correctly, but your thought about some of these new methods and innovations that can support something like this are sort of technology-based or technology-oriented. So I sort of wonder whether that somehow could be worked into the title or the name or the concept that you're talking about, because that seemed to be the critical point.
Mm-hmm. And I think it will gonna become to the light as time passes, as he explores things. So yeah, I think that could kind of clarify itself eventually, the title.
Absolutely, Pari. And what Paul said is also very pertinent. And that is why in the working title theme, I've tried to, insert something like digital age. So rather than telling it technology, which becomes quite parochial, or calling it artificial intelligence becomes, pretty narrowed down. So I've tried to really insert, functionally, as of now, it might develop and, we can have something better. But I've tried to really insert the digital age kind of a word, which really encompasses and brings everything within its umbrella, which is Industrial Revolution 4, artificial intelligence, technology, innovation, and so on and so on and forth. So I have tried, Paul, to insert that little, word, which is digital age. But as we go forward, I'll be happy to, sort of have the change of mind and listen to each one of you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Puran, for the clarification. That's great.
Thank you. Greg, any comments?
No, it's good. I think it's been a useful conversation. I hope it's been helpful, Puran.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. Thank you so much for everything.
So next we go to Leo. Leo, is Leo here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I
Leo,
am.
I want to know how far you've gone in your project. Hi, Leo.
Yeah. So for our 5G white paper, Echo and I have resolved some of the comments that you, Pari, you helpfully gave us for the first section. So I just ended up cleaning up that part, and I think for now, part 1, which is based off just the technology of 5G, is done. So we've moved on to the next part, which is more on the geopolitics side. So I think I saw your comment on the document as I'm starting to build out a table of different telecom providers in different countries and which 5G vendors that they have entered into an agreement with. So I'm going to be adding to that table and then hopefully transitioning that into some sort of map that shows where different 5G vendors are present around the world.
And how much more material you have there in that section? Because I remember you did a lot of study. So
yeah, do you mean for the table or for the overall geopolitics side for the second part?
Overall geopolitics side.
I think Echo and I have enough. We just have to put it on the paper.
Okay. All right. So it's good if you try to do it faster, because the topic is so dynamic, constantly things are added. The more it drags on, the more you have to work, because a lot of material may become old. So I suggest that you try to finish it, the sooner, the better.
Will do. Okay. And I'll relay that to Echo as well.
Yeah. Greg?
No, it sounds good. I'm glad because you had lots of material. I look forward to finding its way back into the paper, which is great.
Definitely.
Yeah. Paul, any comments? Or Paul maybe left because he was in a rush. Okay. So next, Darius.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, it's good
hello.
to have you back. I hope you're feeling
Yes, hello,
better.
Darius.
Yeah, sorry about last week. I accidentally ate a protein bar with some nuts in it, and I'm not supposed to do that. Definitely not supposed to do that. So I was not feeling great. But now I'm good. I'm great.
Good.
I'm great. I'm perfect now.
Good.
Yeah, last time Patty and I talked, she prompted me to add some tables. I was gonna do comparative and contrasting tables. What I like, I'm gonna keep the same format, but sort of put them as a before and after before the section on India, for example. It would be kind of like a recap of the previous section and then sort of building on it throughout the paper to kind of, I guess, make it more engaging. That was like the idea I came up with. And then other than that, as far as monitoring the US's Central Asia policy and Biden's Central Asia policy, the more I read into it and the more I sort of try to figure out exactly like what's Biden's plan for Central Asia, it really still seems like first the level of engagement now and the level of reaching out, especially as the US left Afghanistan and sort of wants to keep that keep a stronghold, a regional stronghold, and then you have Putin coming out and publicly speaking out against that, saying, hey, stay away from Central Asia. This is still Russia's baby. Like, you guys can't interfere here. So, but I do generally think that the U.S. policy towards Central Asia is still pretty wishy-washy. I don't think there's anything very clear or firm about what Biden's doing. But I do think it's interesting that Russia had such a direct and like outspoken response. Or maybe not all of it, but Putin specifically. So yeah, I think I will add a section about the US and their sort of like increased turn towards Central Asia, but I don't think it's going to be too much of anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry I've been dragging my feet with the tables, but I have had it in mind, and I'm gonna get it done like probably in the next few days.
Yeah, that's great, because again with you, I'm worried that constant developments are happening, so your material becomes old. So right now it's very interesting. It's better to publish it, the sooner the better. And you can write about, I think US policies saying that they have started. It's a bit unclear. I think Europe also has some actions building up. So it's good to say that those two also have moved in. Also still their policies are not clear, and nevertheless it's created such a reaction. Greg?
Oh, sounds good. Sounds just right.
Yeah. Okay, so Darius, I look forward to see the finished products. And also I did a bit of styling. Ignore those styling, you just work as you do. They will be corrected, so don't worry about that part.
Okay, great.
All right. Next, Dan. Dan, would you like to tell us where you are?
Yeah, so since the ICS white paper was published, I've kind of moved on and started looking at some new topics that interest me. And the one that in particular I've been researching is like the whole zero trust thing. I'm specifically, I mean, it was pretty well highlighted in Biden's like cybersecurity executive order, which I think kind of brought it to a lot of people's attention. But I'm specifically interested in like the zero trust network architecture. And there's like different ways zero trust can be applied, but that's the way that I'm interested in. And specifically how it's like, I think even more beneficial and impactful when it's like when zero trust network architectures are applied to industrial or facilities and or critical infrastructures, just because they've relied upon kind of like archaic network security models, like air gapping, for instance. And there's, although some of those like air gapping still works in certain situations, there's just a lot of different avenues. And with a lot of like IoT conversion, and then also a lot more people who are using like virtual machines in an office place and logging into their like using their user credentials on cellular devices, or just even the implementation of like more networked devices within these facilities, including like printers, for instance. There's like a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of like push coming from the industrial cybersecurity solutions companies to implement zero trust network architecture. And so I'd kind of want to like break down some of their like really technical explanations and make it a little bit more simplified, so people can kind of get a better understanding of the importance of it. And then specifically, I'm finishing up, I wrote a little review on DHS published a pipeline cybersecurity policy and regulations. And so I wrote up something about that. It's kind of short, but I'll send that over in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Greg?
Oh, it sounds good. Yeah, I think that, the zero trust is at this point sort of a bumper sticker. And so the more you can unpack it and talk about what it actually might mean, particularly for the networks you care most about, I think that'd be all to the good. I look forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. It is absolutely a bumper sticker. People just like love throwing it out there. So like actually diving into what it is and kind of where it can actually be successfully applied is an important topic in my own personal opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So next, Anna. Anna?
Hi. So this week, I've basically been dealing with the new assignment that we're heading towards the pension funds. So basically what I've been doing is I've been looking at the top 10 companies list. So far, I've handled 5, and how I separated the information was basically giving a quick overview of the company's numbers and then moving to their board of directors. After that, I'd explained a little bit more about their voting powers. So like the bylaws, the top insider shareholders, outside investors. I went on to also talk about like their sustainable development goals. And that's something I wanted to ask you more about, Parry, because I know you did say to double check with you before I go too deep into it.
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at their self-reporting kind of material, right?
Yeah. So because I know there's the UN SDG, but there's also the company's own development goals.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I've been kind of looking mostly at the company's one and seeing how it interlinks with the UN's, but I focus more on the company's achievements.
Okay. So for the time being, I think before even you start to consider UN, I suggest you, so far you looked at their self-reporting kind of material. You now need to look at their activity in terms of how they vote when they go to as a board member in their holders meeting. So there are, these are public information. I'm going to send you a link to look at it. There are proxy votings. So you need to look at to see in proxy votings what is happening. Also, you need to identify who are the key shareholders of these companies and who has a voice. So you need to look at shareholders structure. I think I sent you an article on that. So we got to know that if they have structured with different levels of shares treated differently in terms of the power for vote. So we need to understand exactly who votes, who has the power in voting, and then what they're voting for before we even going to UN or anything like that, okay?
Yeah, that's definitely fine. I have already found a lot of things on the proxy statements about dual class shares and stuff. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So now the other, and also on proxies, please try to look at 2021. If you couldn't find it, because some people may not have filed it yet, then look at 2020, but it's best to find 2021. So, and what about the Wiki project?
So the Wiki, I still haven't had access to my colleague's other laptop, but as soon as I do, I will tell you. But yeah.
All right. Okay, so is there anything anyone wants to discuss? No? Okay, in this case, I am going to wish everybody a wonderful week ahead.
A great week.
And yes, and see you next week. Take care. And Puran, again, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
Yes, welcome,
Thank you so
Puran.
much, Greg, for very, important side that you have given to how can I really make it more useful in terms of positioning the whole idea and the issue. So thank you very much once again.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.